Hey guys, Windsor here, and welcome to the Groove Guru podcast. Today, I want to explore something that came up in a call with a client I've been working with, and it relates to what we were exploring musically and also applies to the so called problems that can appear as we go about our life and how we can solve them in an easier and more effortless way. And in that conversation, we were exploring how trusting ourselves and our wisdom can not only deepen our learning, but also help us find answers and allow new creative ideas to emerge naturally in a way that helps us work with much more ease than we might have thought possible. A recent example of this in my own music work, in the process of working on learning some new material for some upcoming shows, after I'd done my due diligence and studying, dissecting, and practicing the music, which is something I go into in more depth in my Excelsior Basics course, which you can find at windsordrums.com/courses. There were a few weeks where I was focused on other things and I wasn't practicing. And after I'd done what I needed to do and came back to practicing that new music after a few weeks, the pieces felt much more secure and deeply integrated than the previous times that I'd practiced them. And I was able to play them with much more fluidity and creative expression than I previously had. And it got me reflecting. And the first point I want to make is that there's a lot to be said for trusting your training and preparation process to inform your performances, whatever that is for you. And simply put, you have to put in the work. But equally important is giving yourself and your mind the space to process and integrate what you're working on. And expanding this idea to other aspects of life beyond music and more from a psychological perspective, the next thing I want to explore is the way that problems show up, which I'm going to say is completely via our mind and thought. So, as I see it, there are two orders of thinking. So, there's life completely as it is, as it appears in front of you right now, and there's the thinking that we do about it. And the only way that we can ever experience a problem is via thought. And another way of saying that is there are no problems in life, only in our thinking. And the thing with thinking is that it's an illusion of the mind that isn't fundamentally real and very rarely true. And that goes for problems. And am I implying that problems aren't real and just in our head? Well, in a way, actually, yes. Now, there are indeed situations and circumstances in the world, but our experience of all of it is generated internally via the mind. So, whilst there are things to do in the world, the experience of problems that we make up in our head is illusionary, but they often look real to us. And you could say they're a real illusion. And how does this help, though, and relate to solving problems? Well, once we understand and start to see that problems are creations of thought, of our thinking, and understand how the mind works at a deeper level, we can approach solving problems differently and in an easier way, which is by allowing rather than forcing. So, when it comes to solving problems, the way that that happens essentially is when we have new and fresh thinking in the moment. And I'm reminded of a quote attributed to Albert Einstein, which is that no problem can be solved on the level of thinking that created it. And otherwise said, we need a new thought with the answer for the solution to a problem to be realized. And here's the thing, we can't force a new thought to appear. It has to come of its own accord, not from deliberate processing, but from allowing it to appear. And instead of using the mind like a computer, which we can, such as by our deliberate thought work and processing, say we're learning new words or frameworks of thought and skills, we have another deeper use of the mind available, which less like a computer is more like an organic intelligence, meaning the natural ability that our mind has to work in the background for us and solve problems creatively, which gives us much greater capacity than conscious efforting alone, and accounts for how, as children, we learn things super quickly without deliberately processing, like we learn to speak English or any other language. And the key to this, what I'm pointing to here, is trusting the deeper nature of our mind to work for us. And that applies to the musical example I gave of after deliberately processing and analysing and practicing my parts, for the deeper integration of learning to happen and the new creative iterations of that to emerge, I essentially had to let go of my thinking and put it on the back burner. And when it comes to finding solutions to any of the problems that we make up, the same applies. As a metaphor, it's a bit like cooking a steak. And one secret to a great steak is letting it rest after cooking so the juices can settle and the flavours can develop. So we have to stop the cooking and leave it alone to allow that to happen. And similarly, like stepping back from a problem allows your deeper mind to work and bring answers at just the right moment. So, how can you apply this more in your own life? Well, have you ever noticed that answers to a problem that's been on your mind often come to you when you stop thinking about it? Well, if you have, you've already experienced what I'm pointing to here, and more deliberately putting this to work for you and making this practical. Think of one problem you've been looking for an answer to, and over the next day or week, whenever it comes to mind, let it go. Now, this isn't about ignoring or denying the problem, it's about creating space for your wisdom to work. Because your wisdom is always the source of your answers, custom made for you in your situation. And the more you trust it, the more you might be surprised by the solutions that emerge. And in this way, problem solving can become much more effortless and unfold in a whole new way for you. Problem solving doesn't need to be forced. When we trust our wisdom, answers come effortlessly and at the perfect time. And it's never a question of if they will, only when. So, have fun, trust your wisdom, and I'll speak with you soon.